This is Small Changes in Teaching, Big Results in Learning by John Fanselow, presented by the TEFLology Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the first episode of another short series based on sections of chapters from John Fanselow's book, Small Changes in Teaching, Big Results in Learning. If you haven't listened to our first series, that consisted of 5 episodes, and it came out at the end of last year, 2019, and the beginning of this year, 2020. And so if you're interested, please go back and listen to those. These are all audio versions of parts of John's book, read by John himself, and they have been edited to better fit an audio format. This first episode comes from Chapter 7, Section 4, and it's called Very Good, Great Job, Excellent. Enjoy.
In almost every classroom in the world, teachers say words like very good, good job, excellent, after students respond to their questions or perform tasks. When I have students transcribe a few minutes of their classes, they rarely write very good, even though they clearly can hear the teacher saying it on the recording. When I ask them why, they say that their teachers say these words all the time, even when they make errors, so they think the words are meaningless. When I ask teachers to transcribe a few minutes of their classes, they almost always write down very good, or good job, or excellent, every time they hear it. When I ask them why they say such words after almost every student response, the teachers say that positive feedback is very important in learning. They say they have to praise students so that they feel good about what they are doing. The teacher's meaning of positive feedback and the meanings in many dictionaries are very different. Here are 2 definitions. Positive feedback in biology: the enhancement or amplification of an effect by its own influence on the process that gives rise to it. Positive feedback in electronics: the return of part of an output signal to the input, which is in phase with it, so that the amplifier gain is increased and the output is often distorted. Like most definitions, these are difficult to understand, but one thing is clear in these definitions, and that is that the feedback is kind of a loop, an internal loop. Both in biology and electronics, there's no outside influence that's causing the changes. It's all internal, an internal loop, no external influence. Now, the teacher's definition, in contrast to those in biology and electronics that you just heard, is easier to understand. But in fact, do learners need praise that is so general and is said after almost every response, including after mistakes? So positive feedback, praise, easily defined, but the question is, do they make any sense in reality when we look at the data? The fact that students I have asked to transcribe recordings of 3-minute segments of lessons have failed to write their teachers saying very good, good job, excellent, supports my claim that so-called positive feedback might not have any effect. However, Alfie, A-L-F-I-E, Cohen, K-O-H-N, has reviewed many studies and come to the same conclusion, which he sums up in a quotation from The Praise Problem, a chapter of his book, Punished by Rewards. Here Cohen is citing another study. Children have an intrinsic desire to learn. Praise and manipulation can only serve to stifle that natural motivation and replace it with blind conformity, a mechanical work style, or open defiance towards authority. Students at all levels say that if they have to be bribed to do something by being praised, it must mean that the task is not very worthwhile. Bribes include waiting for a teacher's praise. intrinsic interest evaporated after rewards were introduced, is a conclusion of many studies that Cohen cites. Some teachers do more than say, great job, very good, etc. They give rewards like candy, gold stars on student notebooks, a pizza party for students who read one book for a month, to cite a few examples. Cohen points out that when we are working for a reward, we do exactly what is necessary to get to it and no more. Risks are to be avoided whenever possible, because the objective is not to engage in an open encounter with ideas. It is simply to get the goodie. Rewards are the enemies of exploration. Edward L. Thorndike and John Dewey both were key figures in educational research. On some matters they disagreed because Thorndike was keen on the development of standardized tests, while Dewey was not. But on the matter of what engages students, they were in agreement. Here is what each of them said. Thorndike: unlike 100 years ago, the approved view today is that an intrinsic interest in the activity, regardless of ulterior consequences, is an enormously superior means of learning. Here's what Dewey said. If there is not an inherent attracting power in the material, then the teacher will either attempt to surround the material with foreign attractiveness, making a bid or offering a bribe for attention by making the lesson interesting, or else will resort to low marks, threats of non-promotion, staying after school. But the attention thus gained always remains dependent upon something external. True reflective attention, on the other hand, always involves judging, reasoning, deliberation. It means that the child has a question of his own and is actively engaged in seeing and selecting relevant material with which to answer it. I once asked a third-year university student in Japan to remove a cufflink from the right sleeve of my shirt. It was quite a tricky cufflink, which required both thought and fiddling with to undo. As you can probably imagine, it did not require a constant stream of praise to eventually undo the cufflink. John Dewey and Edward Thorndike both would have been thrilled seeing the great delight on his face as he removed the cufflink and said, "I did it," which has nothing to do directly with language teaching, but it illustrates what Cohen, Dewey, Thorndike, and I suggest, and that is that we have to tap students' natural curiosity, and if we do, learning is its own reward. No very goods are necessary. What to do? One option: information versus praise and judgments. Since a major part of our responsibility as teachers is to assess our students, what are we to do if saying very good seems to have some negative consequences? Giving specific information is one option. For example, saying, in your first description of your sister, you use 3 specific examples. She has black hair, brown eyes, and is 1 meter tall. In your third description, after I suggested you add more specific examples, you said her black hair was straight, she was 1 meter tall and weighed 45 kilos, and that she wore a red ribbon in her hair. These added examples helped me to picture your sister better. Or, you read the passage in 3 minutes the first time, and in 2 minutes the second time. You crossed out 5 words you did not know in your first reading, and 3 words you did not know in your second reading. So you read faster and understood more the second time you read the passage, because the first time you read the passage in 3 minutes, and the second time in 2 minutes. Providing information rather than a judgment decreases the chances that students are just going to do what you want so they can receive praise from you. Information is also more helpful than saying very good. What, in fact, was very good? The pronunciation, stating the facts you wanted, answering quickly before the other students, answering at all. Another option is to ask questions about what students have done rather than to praise what they have done. Saying your drawing is great provides no information and does not lead your students to think about alternatives. Here's another option. In your drawing, you have two mountains. One painted purple and white, and one painted blue and white. Which color do you think is more real? Or are both equally real? You drew clouds on the purple mountain. Was this because you think that mountain is higher? Of course, you have to ask such questions one at a time and wait for the response before you ask a second one. And as I've suggested elsewhere, you might ask the student to write the questions, so then the student can go back to the sketch, reread the questions, and then think about them and write the responses. Giving more time, 9 times out of 10, is going to produce more sophisticated comments and longer comments. So time is very important when we provide information and we ask questions about what students are doing. If you record and transcribe your questions and student responses and write down the amount of time you allow for a response, you will see that the more time you allow, the more students say or write after you ask a question. If you would like to learn more about this phenomenon, I highly recommend an overview article by Mary Budd Rowe, R-O-W-E, titled Wait Time, Slowing Down May Be a Way of Speeding Up. Of course, if we tell students to write a few questions about what they have drawn or done, we will be able to learn more about their thinking processes as well. To teach without providing corrections is to abdicate our responsibility. When I have asked students how they feel about corrections, almost all say they want to be corrected immediately and they want to practice and use the correct forms. When they play rugby together or sing songs together, they correct each other and are not at all embarrassed, on the whole, by being corrected. They realize that mistakes are part of learning, but have to be eliminated. As I always say, do not believe anything I or others say. Compare what you and others do with what I suggest, and compare the results. Also, take time to ask students what type of feedback is more helpful to them. Do they find general praise useful? Would they rather hear specific information about what they have done? Now, I mentioned Cohen quoted Dewey and Thorndike, and I quoted Mary Budd Rowe about wait time. I was a colleague of Mary Budd Rowe at Teachers College, Columbia University. Of course, John Dewey and Thorndike died way before I got there, but they had a great influence on me, not only because I read them, but because I was in classrooms that they had been in decades before.
Okay, we hope you enjoyed that. As I mentioned in the intro, these audio versions of chapters from the book differ from the written version, which includes pictures, diagrams, and links to videos that exemplify a lot of what John's talking about. The book is available on Amazon, iBooks, and you can also find a lot of information about it on the ITDI website, which is at itdi.pro, P-R-O. Okay, we'll be back soon with the second episode from the series. Thanks for listening.